Welcome to I Got Nothing, a podcast for exhausted writers. I am your host, Leani Lopez, here with you again to talk about writing. This next topic that I have, I actually had it submitted back for season 1, and I really wanted to include it, but then, life and pandemic and all that jazz happened, so it didn't really work out that way, so I'm very excited to bring it into season 2. The topic I have is one that was a pretty big struggle for me in the beginning, and that is developing characters. In fiction, characters are everything. They drive the story. At least to me, that is my opinion. When it comes to writing, for me personally, it's all about the characters. Because you can have a great plot, you can have a fantastic setting, but if your characters don't do their job and don't carry either of those two things, or can't, then it doesn't matter how good the plot is, because if the characters are, one-dimensional, poorly written, blah, 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 then you don't really get the plot. And the setting really doesn't matter all too much. Again, these are all my personal opinions. I am not an expert, but just in my own writing, developing characters is a really important thing for me. I might have shared this story already, but I'm going to share it again. I remember when I was in college, I think I was in junior year, and the best class, hands down, I have ever had in my 4 years of college was a creative writing workshop. It was a group of maybe 10, not even, upperclassmen, and all we did was work on our own personal writings, print out copies for everyone, and share. That was it. Your assignment was to bring in what you're working on, give copies to your classmates. You would all take them home, read them, and then we would reconvene and have class discussion. You would have 6 or 7 people giving you feedback on your writing, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And for me, who had a very small audience, a very specific audience for my writing when I was younger, it was just such an eye-opener to hear feedback from other people, constructive feedback. And it was hard. It's not easy to hear feedback, especially if it's something you're really, really passionate about or really, really involved with. But it's so important. And one of the notes that my teacher pointed out, which I hadn't thought of, it was a scene between 2 sisters. And he pointed out that it was hard for him to distinguish who was speaking because they both were speaking the same way. Neither one of them had their own distinct voice. And it was something I hadn't considered before. And when I was looking at the conversation, I realized that he was right. When there was a back and forth between these characters, I knew who was who because I wrote it, but nobody else did. And it was in that moment that I realized that I really needed to focus on developing the character themselves and their voice, not just putting them in a scenario and making them speak. I had to actually look at why they were speaking, what they were saying, and why they were saying it the way they were. And that was something I hadn't considered. I think I was like 20 at the time, 19, 20. So of course I hadn't considered that. Hell, I didn't even know why I said the things I did. I still don't know why I say the things I do. But if I'm creating a character, I need to know that information about them, even if the audience doesn't. So there's a lot you can convey with characters based on what they say and based on what they don't say. For a lot of writers, the way to do that is they create backstories for their characters. It's really important to have at least an idea of where your character came from. You don't have to have this whole big elaborate backstory. I know there are a lot of writers who find it really comforting. There are a lot of templates for creating characters that has literal bullet points like age, name, height, weight, eye color, childhood trauma, or anxieties, or family members' names. And I've tried using some of those, but for me personally, that's just a lot, and I get really overwhelmed, and I don't find it very fun. Some people do, and good on them. Do what works for you. For me, I always start with a paragraph, just a basic description of the person, and then I kind of work backwards from there. And I don't like to flesh out too much because I'm the kind of person that when I'm writing, a lot of ideas come to me, and I feel like if I flesh out too much, I kind of get stuck in this little box of what stuff is supposed to be and don't allow the story and characters to kind of grow organically. But I at least start with a blueprint. A basic, this is the character, this is the age range they're in, this is their personality at the moment when the readers are meeting them. And then once I get that sorted out, I just write and I let the characters speak for themselves. So, for example, one of the projects I am working on now, one of my stories that I'm working on is called Ghost. It is a crime thriller with some romance thrown in, very much in the vein of Nora Roberts and Mary Higgins Clark. They are my two favorite authors. I've loved them since I was a teenager. I grew up on their books. So I really wanted to try that genre because I love it so much. And the main character is Charlotte Mercer. She is a former detective with the small town police department where she lives. But when we meet her in the story, she is on suspension because of certain things that happen. I don't want to give too much away. But while I'm writing her, one of the very important pieces of the story is the relationship with her deceased sister, Deanna. And I knew I would have to show a lot of that in flashbacks, and I would have to show that relationship in terms of how Charlotte reacts to things and why she's doing what she's doing. And I knew all that going in, but a lot of the nuances of the character I didn't. For example, I just created Charlotte. I wasn't expecting her to be any kind of ethnicity or race or anything of that nature. But when doing a flashback, while I was writing, she referred to her grandmother as abuela. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, she's Latina. Okay, cool. And that just kind of happened organically. I didn't mean for it to. I was pulling Charlotte's memory a little bit from something from my childhood. And that's where abuela slipped in because I'm Puerto Rican. So Charlotte's Puerto Rican now. And it just feels right. Just makes sense. And I just kind of noted that in my background on her and kept going. So there's a certain point where developing characters happens when you are also writing them. Honestly, you can flesh out everything you want about the character. You can go through those templates and you can fill them out and you can write your elaborate backstories and you can do bullet points or whatever works for you. But the main concern is taking that information and translating it to the story. A lot of that information the readers are not going to see. And that's fine. They shouldn't have to see all of that information to learn about your character. As a writer, it's important to use that information to tell the story rather than telling the story with that information. Another big thing that has been difficult, or was difficult for me early on, but I am enjoying using it now, is let your characters have flaws. And yeah, little flaws like she's messy or he is very neurotic or, little things like that. But I mean, let them fail. I mean, let them do something really stupid and let them make mistakes because we're human. That's what happens. And as much secondhand embarrassment as you can get when it comes to characters, and as much anxiety as you have when it comes to characters, it's going to make for a compelling read if your character is flawed in some way. And having flaws can be the difference from taking a 2-dimensional character to a 3D-dimensional character. So again, since this is the project I'm working on, in Ghost, Charlotte was an investigator. She is suspended. She still has those investigation instincts and she's still doing her own investigation. But now she has to get creative because she doesn't have the resources she did when she worked in the police station. So she has to lie. She has to swipe evidence. She has to go behind her ex-partner's back and get information because she has to solve this mystery. She's trying to solve what happened to her sister. The plot of the story is her sister's death was ruled a suicide. Charlotte knows it was a homicide. And so she is trying to prove that. And she can't prove that by being a goody-goody. She can't prove that by going and explaining her case and expecting people to just be like, oh, sure. Because it's just not realistic. It's not going to work that way. And as much as she loves Mike, her ex-partner, and misses working with him, she also has a grudge against him. She also is angry with him. So she is impulsive, which can be a flaw. Not necessarily is one, but in certain instances, i.e. taking evidence from a crime scene, that is a flaw. And she lies and she bribes so she can find the truth. And, those are part of her flaws. Also, she just doesn't take care of herself, and she's so focused and determined that she's kind of letting everything else fall by the wayside. And at least to me, that makes her a more compelling character because she has such an intense moral code, and she knows deep in her bones that what they're saying happened to her sister didn't happen. And so she has the motivation and drive to do whatever it takes necessary to prove her point. And I love characters like that. I really, really do. I grew up with characters like that. And so to be writing one is pretty fun. Another thing that's important when developing characters is consistency, which can be difficult when you are going along for the ride and may not have all those bullet points checked off. But then again, that's why we have editing. But it's very important to be consistent, not just in the character backstory and information, but consistent in their characterization. So Charlotte's angry. Charlotte is determined. Charlotte doesn't sleep very well. So she's going to be short-tempered. She is going to keep things close to the chest. She is going to either outright deny things or flat out tell people they're being stupid because of the other factors that I just mentioned. And so that is consistent with her character. And obviously, as the story progresses, she's going to grow, she's going to change, she's going to react different ways. And that's all well and good. You just have to show that growth so that it doesn't come across as inconsistent. There has to be beats as to why she makes those changes. So you got to make sure you show your readers that. I know. So as I'm saying all this, it just makes me laugh. So anybody who tells you that writing is easy doesn't know what they're talking about. Because there are so many factors you have to keep straight in your head when you're writing and creating characters and developing characters and creating a plot. So if anybody tells you that writing is easy, just shoot them down and tell them that is absolutely not the case. Like, yes, it is easy. That is why I have to keep the personalities of 5 separate characters straight in my head, remember their motivations, think about their growth, and also tie all of that into the plot and what's happening. Yeah, totally easy. Easy peasy. Yeah, bullshit. It's not easy. So we talked about being consistent, and we talked about having your character have flaws, and I touched upon this, but I'll do it again. Let your character grow. I feel like most characters should not be the same exact way they were at the beginning. There's certain characters that works for. One of my favorites from the Hellblazer series, John Constantine. He never learns. He never fucking learns. He just doesn't. And that's actually part of his character, and I think part of his charm after all this time. There are certain things that do change him. He changes a lot, but at the core, he's pretty much the self-sufficient bastard he was from the first issue. So for certain characters, that really works. And if one of your characters is like that, cool. Those are fun too. Play with it. But for the most part, you gotta let them grow and learn. Usually the hard way. As with life, we rarely learn lessons the easy way. So you have to give your characters something to overcome to teach them the lessons you want them to learn. And maybe lessons you don't want them to learn, lessons they need to learn, because there could be a difference between the two. But for me, when developing characters and writing, it's always important to show that uphill battle, to show those changes, to show what they're going through. Occasionally tell. You know, you always hear the phrase, show versus tell. And that does have a lot of merit, but there are certain things that it's just easier just to tell. I think it's important to find a healthy balance of the two. And honestly, that's the key word, balance. A lot of this is balance. It's a balancing act. And you always find yourself, well, are they too much of this? Is this too much? Is this not enough? And that's why we have editing, and that's why the editing process takes forever. Because one draft, you can be like, okay, cool. This thing happened, they're going to react this way. And then when you reread it, you're like, no. Knowing what I know about the end of the story and knowing where this character ends up, they would not react this way. They should react this way because X, Y, and Z. That's why you have editing. I know for me, the hardest part is putting something on a blank piece of paper. I actually really enjoy the editing process because I feel like I flesh things out a lot more. But when I'm just staring at a blank page, I try to put literally all of this I just said in the first draft, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. This is why you have multiple drafts. First draft is to have it written. It's not to have it perfect. I know we want to have it perfect. I know we don't want to have to do too much editing, but it's okay to edit. First draft doesn't need to be perfect. Your characters definitely don't need to be perfect. They shouldn't be perfect because we're human. None of us are perfect. We all have flaws. We all make mistakes. And I feel like readers connect more with a character that they can see themselves in and that they can witness make the mistakes that they do and see how they handle it versus how they themselves may have handled it. Yeah, so that is what I wanted to say about developing characters. I can talk about this forever, so I'm sure I'll have another episode down the line, developing characters part 2. But if you have any questions about what I said, if you want me to expand on anything, please feel free to shoot me a message. Let me know. You guys can find me on Instagram at Leani M. Lopez or my Facebook page, Leani Lopez, or some of my Tumblr peeps if you're still listening. Hey, I know I haven't posted fanfics in a while. Life's crazy. But thanks for listening and keeping up with me. Yeah, so this has been episode 2 of season 2 of I Got Nothing, and hope to talk to you guys soon. Bye.